All right, we are live here on Sunday Night AstroLive with myself, Robert Phoenix. I apologize for being just a tad late. I'm just a tad late. Well, it depends on what you consider late. So normally we go at 6 p.m., but I set the StreamYard alert to go off at 6:15. So technically, it's kind of late. Uh, but then it was a minute late after that. Anyway, I'm here now. You're here now. We're here now. That's all that counts. That's all that matters. We're here together. So to that, I raised my can of Zevia Stevia Cola. My new favorite drink, by the way. If I could get them as a sponsor, I would. So if there's any Zevia representatives out there that dig astrology and this brand of astrology, hook me up. Look me up and hook me up. How is everybody? You guys doing okay tonight? Ready to get into some astrology? We'll do that. We'll definitely do that. I'm not sure how long we're going to go tonight because I don't have a ton of material planned, although I have enough for us to chew on it a little bit. But it is Easter Sunday, Easter, whatever you think of that, right? It is Easter Sunday night. And, you know, some people just take the whole day off. And that's the case here in this part of Texas. Texas, very Christian place. Very, very Christian place. And the major grocery store in town only has 2 days off per year. Christmas and Easter. That's it. And even the little natural food grocer in town only has well, I think today they're off too. So if you had to get something, you'd have to go to Walmart, and you know who really wants to go to Walmart. I mean, sometimes you have to go to Walmart. You live out here, it's part of the deal, you know, unless you want to travel to San Antonio or even Kerrville. I mean, Kerrville, you're just going to get into another Walmart. Doesn't really matter. So either be San Antonio or Austin, and that's it. So sometimes you got to, when in Rome, as they say, do as the Romans. And I hope everybody's having a rock solid weekend. We've had the Scorpio moon most of the weekend, so we're headed into kind of that resurrection point of the moon, which I talked about on the show on Friday as we went into this kind of deep, intense Scorpio moon hitting the south node, and then coming out the other side over here with the moon moving into Sagittarius, which will be very interesting. I mean, sometimes these subtle movements of the celestials can make an impact on our lives. And with the moon in Sagittarius, we might be feeling just a tad more hopeful over the next couple of days as it moves into trine with the sun in the final degrees of Aries. Of course, it'll trine Jupiter. So our spirit and our moods might have the opportunity to catch a bit of an updraft here, right? As we have kind of descended into this trough of the Scorpio moon hitting the south node. And we're going to talk about the next big eclipse going to be happening on 4/20. If that day sounds familiar to you, there's a reason why. It's a day that's often associated with sacrifice, especially the sacrifice of children as it relates to the Babylonian god Molech or Moloch, depending upon your pronunciation of it. And there's a whole raft of activities that have occurred in and around that day and time, probably the most egregious of which was the wholesale sacrificial bonfire of children in Mount Carmel, just outside of Waco, in the Branch Davidian compound. And that was pretty significant and happening right around the 20th of April. Of course, we all know that, again, theoretically, this is around the time that Adolf Hitler was born, and there's all kinds of events, the Oklahoma City bombing. So we'll get into that a little bit tonight. It's a very fated day to have an eclipse, for sure. And it's the second in the last eclipse cycle, second eclipse in the final eclipse cycle of the Taurus Scorpio eclipse cycle. So we're getting ready to move out of this cycle now, which we've been in since we had the nodal shift. And when we move into the next nodal shift in April, the next series of eclipses will occur between the signs of Aries and Libra, which should be very interesting, to say the least, because of all the other things that are going on, especially in the sign of Aries. We're going to have a Saturn change coming up in Aries in 3 years. Neptune's going to change. It's going to move into Aries. We're all going to move there together. Chiron is in Aries. Of course, we'll have the true node in Aries. So it'll be a very big time and we're kind of, we've been in a very intense period where there's been a lot of Aries energy in the air. And I wouldn't say it's a precursor, but you might be able to get a bit of a feel for what's coming. It's funny, Greg Popovich shot his mouth off again. If you know who Greg Popovich is, he's a coach for the San Antonio Spurs. And what's really weird about Popovich is that he's an Aquarius. That's not the weird part. The weird part is that he's a military guy. Greg Popovich comes out of the military. He comes out of the military. And then one of the things that he brought to the table as an executive and then as a coach for the San Antonio Spurs was a sense of discipline and order. He was kind of like a Bobby Knight, Bill Belichick sort of guy, right? That was his vibe. And when Dennis Rodman was playing for the San Antonio Spurs, who's about as out there as it gets, Greg Popovich couldn't fucking stand him. Couldn't stand him. And he kind of tolerated him because he knew that they were a better team with Rodman. Then, of course, when it came opportunity to trade him, he wasted no time, traded him to the Chicago Bulls, where Dennis Rodman won 3 more rings. 3 more NBA championship rings. I think Dennis has a total of 5, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure if he got one with the Lakers. I know he got 3 with the Bulls and 2 with the Pistons. I hope he has them all. Dennis has had some hard financial times, but the reason why I think that Popovich didn't get along with Dennis is because Popovich Aquarius, Dennis Taurus, those signs are square. Nobody's going to budge off of that beef. Nobody's budging off that beef. But Popovich went from being this hardcore military guy to all of a sudden becoming, Mr. Social justice warrior. And about 2 years ago, during the whole George Floyd thing, he couldn't stop talking about white privilege. And I mean, it was just getting to be, just pardon my language, you're fucking ridiculous. Okay. If you've ever seen Greg Popovich's house, it's enormous. It always blows my mind that all these people that spout, white privilege and scolding the rest of us for that, never want to give up anything they have. You think he would just say, "Hey, look, my house is way too big. It's too privilegey. Why don't you guys come move in over here? I'm gonna take a 2-2 down by the stadium. So I don't even have to drive to work. I'll just take a 2-2 and I'll just walk to work." Jerry Brown did it when he was governor of California. Greg Popovich couldn't do it. No, Greg Popovich lives in a mansion. Huge, sprawling place. There's always the interesting asterisk. Anyway, he's been spouting off again against, we got to take the guns away. Became an anti-gun guy. Mr. Military guy became an anti-gun guy. I guess that's what happens when you're an Aquarius. You'll just do that flip, right? You'll do that Aquarian flip and invert everything. Anyway, so yeah, he's been kind of going on. And we're going to be dealing with a lot of these themes as we move forward with Chiron in Aries. And, who knows? We got this big eclipse coming up, the Molech eclipse, with, again, some Aries themes going on, but also some heavy duty financial themes going on. So we'll talk about that tonight. We'll cover that tonight. So we've got that on board. We'll look at the chart of the moment as well. We'll do that tonight. And I thought it would be interesting for us to take a look at Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s chart, and also the chart of the election in November of 2024. That's on the 5th of November. And it's a very interesting chart. It's a super interesting chart. It the Pluto will be in Capricorn the night of that chart. It'll be retrograde. So I can tell you right now that election is not going to go down easy. It is not going to, oh, look, what a great election we've had. It was so efficient and so fair. Oh, no, 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 no. No, 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 no. It is going to be a very interesting time with Pluto retrograde in Capricorn. It will be the last official election in this country if you're playing by Placidus. Of course, sidereal, you're still kind of out there somewhere in Pluto and Capricorn. But it'll be our last official election in this country with Pluto and Capricorn. That's it. Right. After that, every single election moving forward will be in Aquarius. I do think that this will be the election of the last American president. Something different is going to happen, right? We're coming through the Pluto return. When we get through the Pluto return, and that includes 28, 29 degrees Capricorn, and we're on the other side, on the far shore of Pluto and Aquarius, this is going to be a different place. We're just going to be a fundamentally different country. There's no two ways about it. And will it be better? Will it be worse? It might be both. It could be better and worse simultaneously. Wouldn't that be very Aquarian? I think it would be. But that'll be well. And when we get into the chart, I'll show you. It seems to me to be the last, the election of the last American president, because everything else after that, it's different. It's just fundamentally different. So we'll look at that tonight. We'll look at the upcoming eclipse tonight. We'll look at RFK Jr.'s chart. We'll also look at RFK Jr.'s chart as it relates to the election. Now, nothing's a given. He could drop out. He could go through this. What's interesting about this election is that Biden's going to be primaried. He will be primaried if he's still around. If he's still around, he'll be primaried. Maybe he just says, "I'm not going to run." Yeah. At this point, with Biden, I think it's very, very hard to make any astrological predictions. I'll be honest with you, because I don't think we're even dealing with the guy who has the birth chart. How can this is where it gets tricky. And people say, well, how do you deal with it? How do you deal with how do you deal with somebody who might be a clone? Like, would you use their birth chart? And I would tend to say probably not, because first of all, do I really know if that person's a clone or not? I don't know. If there's multiples of Biden, and there certainly seems to be, we've seen multiples of any number of other presidents as well. There seems like there was more than one Trump there at the end. Clearly there was more than one George W. Bush. And I think both of them would wind up giving addresses to the public. I remember distinctly there was one George W. Bush who was kind of feeble and pat bald-headed guys on the head, and there was another one who was a cutthroat motherfucking killer. I mean, you just look in that guy's eyes, oh, holy shit. So I mean, he really, that's how he came off. There was that Star Trek episode when Kirk comes back up in the teleporter. Do you remember that episode? And there are two Kirks. There is one who is just a complete savage, like a bloodthirsty savage. Like he is such a Nietzschean character. He's beyond the Ubermensch. And then there's the other one who is contemplative and soft and caring, but he can't make up his fucking mind. Right? One of them wants to destroy everything. The other can't even figure out whether or not they want to go to warp 2 or warp 3, because maybe it might be bad for the environment or something. Right. I mean, that's how it was. So there was a Bush that was like that. It was weird. There was never any in between Bush. It was always the docile kind of village idiot, and then the guy who looked like, he'd kill everybody, and and let God sort out the rest. So it's hard. It's hard to pinpoint. I think Biden is hard to pinpoint astrologically. So to look at his chart and say, well, is he going to run again? Also, I'm not even going to go there because I don't think I could get a fair draw on his chart at all. Not at this point. So he's going to be primaried. Will he run? Who knows? My sense is that he won't. He won't run. Because if he's going to be primaried, and he is, and we got RFK in the mix, we got who else is in there? Marianne Williamson. Expect Gavin Newsom's name to pop in there. He will. His name will pop in there. So there will be this primary of Joe Biden. And so Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is going to be one of those candidates. And provided that he stays in the race, we'll take a look at his chart. We'll take a look at his chart anyway. But he's got a big uphill battle, and it's kind of fitting because he's a Capricorn. He's got a big uphill battle because, number one, he has a serious disadvantage with his voice. He can't really talk that well. It's very hard to understand him. I don't really have a problem understanding him. I've listened to him, but for all intents and purposes, it's going to be harder for him to really get down in debates and debate with people. So that's one. And then the other is the Kennedy curse. I mean, clearly there is a history of Kennedy men, having tragedy strike them. And again, whatever you think about, JFK or Bobby, they faked their death. They're gone. Okay. Whether they faked their death and they're hanging out in an underground bunker, banging a geriatric Marilyn Monroe. He's not Jimmy Carter. I'm sorry. JFK is not Jimmy Carter. So if you think that and you want to roll with that, that's fine. In our consciousness, they're dead. Okay. They're dead. Whatever you think, they're dead. So I'm rolling with the they're dead part. Okay. Then you have Teddy Kennedy, who, of course, had the whole Chappaquiddick thing. So there's this weird curse of the Kennedys, and Bobby is going to have to, or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is going to have to, answer that gauntlet, because it will come up, right? The closer we move to this event, the more it's going to come up, and the more we're going to get echoes and images of the past. I think his entry into the election is significant, whether he wins or not. I think it's significant. I think it's a sign, actually, that takes us back to a different timeline. So let's get into the show. Let's see who we have here. Who's in the house. It's always great to see who's hanging out. We got my man, DJ MC. Happy Easter to you too, Papa Mike. Good to see you. There's my man, Thomas Jordan. Good evening, Tom. Always a pleasure to have you here. Benito Diaz. Hello, Benito. Great to see my Scorpio friend. Oh, look who's here. It's Leon Vito Vincent Radway back in the house. What's going on, Leon? Good to see you. There she is, the lovely and talented one, Dr. Joan S. Let's see. There's my man Ryan, the introspective woodworker, president of the Introspective Woodworkers Union of the World. Very powerful union. The thing about it is not many people know about it. That's how powerful it is. It's a secret. It's a secret union, and you have to know the woodworkers handshake in order to be recognized. And there are penalties for me to divulge that. Susie Gemini, here she is. How you doing, Susie? Good to see you here. Lola, happy Easter back at you. Dave Haza, hi, Dave. Let's see who else. CC Jones, the fantastic one. She's here with us. LMM is going to be a guest on the Friday Forecast next week. That's going to be fun. We're going to talk about tremor release therapy. It'll be very cool. Very, very cool. Really looking forward to that. So join us next Friday. One of our Chatarians pops in from the virtual. Let's see, who else do we have? Glemma Spank. Is it Glemma Spencer? I think it's Glemma Spencer. Hi, Glemma. Happy Sunday night. Let's see. Who else? You know what I did today? I did a reverse sear on a steak today. First time I've ever done that. Worked out great. Let's see. Who else do we have? Lala, first time. Oh, Lala. Well, great. We're glad to have you here. Leah King did a little breakdown of RFK Jr. too. Oh. Interesting. Let's see. Who else? JJ Rain de Blanc. What's going on, JJ? Mark, yes. There's my man. Good to see you. Mr. Tune. I almost had a Bugs Bunny tune back here. I wanted to do something with a rabbit. I found something with a rabbit hole. It was really pretty cool. But you wouldn't have been able to see it because the rabbit would have been right over my head and the whole effect would have missed. Good to see you, Mark. Wendy Eater. What's going on, Wendy? Yes. Susie, you are in our thoughts for sure. It's great to have Wendy back. SL Sully is here. Hello, SL Sully. Third eye activated. Made it to 49. Hey. Happy solar return, third eye. 49 on 4/9. It's your birthday, right? Woohoo. So you do a birthday song for Heyoka. Let's see what we got. Let's do YouTube. Let's do a little birthday song for her. Your birthday, you get a birthday song. You get a birthday song for your birthday. However, it may not be the birthday song that you may think it will be, because this is how we roll around here. This is how we roll. All right. Oh boy, that's a little raunchy. We did the mariachi song. Let's see, what else do we have? The Beatles' rare happy birthday song. There's a funny happy birthday song. Everybody likes funny happy birthday song. Okay. That's too long. 4 minutes and 34 seconds is too long for a birthday song. We'll lose the crowd. There's a song called Birthday Sex. Birthday Sex. I guess that would be a good birthday song on some level. Here you go. This one is for you. Hey, Ukaya, this is your birthday song. Just for you. It's just for you. Here we go. Let's do a little share here. This is for you, Heyoka. This is 2 minutes and 24 seconds of Happy Birthday Dance.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you. How old are you. How old are you? Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. You look like a monkey and you smell like one.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday. That's what you call the shape of things to come. I thought that was appropriate. Little Heyoka moment. Little Heyoka dance moment. I love when the guy got rid of the canes. Got rid of his little walking sticks, and man, he tore it up. Anyway, happy 49th birthday. Sandra Jack Shaw is here. Sandra, I think we still got a reading on the book, so you need to reach out to me and take care of that. Let's see, who else do we have? Marie MacArthur, happy Easter back at you, Marie. SL Sully. SL Sully. Kelly, I'm a double Pisces, so I'm really enjoying the background. Oh, cool. Excellent. It was not my first choice, but I'm glad you like it. Let's see. Sony's in the house. What's going on, Sony? Cameron Quaid, yikes about 420 and the children. Yeah, I know, right? Well, here's what we're here to do. We are here to break the spell because we're going to talk about it. We're going to dispel the notion that an event that would be atrocious could happen on 420 or thereabouts, which would involve children and or the use of guns anywhere, right? We're here to dispel that. We're here to break the spell. And by talking about it, that's exactly what we're going to do. Let's see, who else do we have? Mary Stevens, checking in from Rapid City, South Dakota. Hello, Mary. Let's see, who else do we have? Soul Traveler, hi back. There's my man, Jeff. How you doing? I hope you're doing well. We should talk this week. Catch up. Let's see, who else? Who else is here? Harriet Bowie. It's not a show without Harriet Bowie. I'm telling you that right now. My man Robin, Easter at Augusta was gorgeous. Robin loves his sticks and balls and holes. Let's put it that way. Let's see who else we have. Karen McQuaid is here. Hi, Karen. Cato. Columbine shooting. Yep, 420. Got that right. Back in 99, turn of the century. Queen Lisa. What's going on, Queen Lisa? Good to see you. Maya Rose. Hi, Maya Rose. We got a good group here tonight. Good group. Lana Anderson, my neighbor, above me, flooded their apartment and water was coming out of my kitchen light sockets this morning. Yow. Wow. That's something to wake up to. Hey, Jake's here. What's going on, Jake? Gucci the Goats. She's with us. Magic Cat is here. Hi, Magic Cat with an ICK. Third flood in the building in 1 week. I have no idea what's going on. I have an idea. Your building sucks. You don't suck, but your building sucks. So that's the bottom line. Kelly B, one of our resident Scorpio. She's here tonight. Good to see you, Kelly. Let's see, who else do we have? Happy birthday, Third Eye. There we go. We call Bill, coach of the Patriots, the Emperor. He is, man. He's like Bill Belichick's like a Sith Lord, I have to say. A little bit of a Sith Lord. Queen Lisa had a good Easter birthday too, coming up here. Neo, what's happening, Neo? Neo's here. Let's see. I got some sheep yogurt today. Oh, sheep yogurt. I like the goat yogurt. I think I've had sheep yogurt too. I've had them both. They're both really good. Really, really good. My moon, 16 Aries. Fiery. Get a fiery moon. Got a fiery moon. Tempestuous. Passionate. Let's see. My Cherie, Anulani. Aloha back. There's my man, Steve. What's going on, Steve Letro? Are we in Pisces or Aries season? we're in Aries season, but it's a resurrection, right? The age of Pisces. Sometimes you got to roll with it. You know, I had a rabbit thing planned, but I couldn't fit it into the. So we're gonna roll with the Pisces, the Jesus theme, resurrection. By the way, the image of the show, the thumbnail, is my favorite image of that depiction by the German painter Matthias Grunwald. He's like the cosmic Christ that's risen. Who else we have? Nunya Beeswax is here. Chiron has been feeling easily hurt lately. Has been me feeling easily hurt lately. Let's see. Lisa says, remember when Robert mentioned your money getting messed with right now? Couldn't log into my bank account because I reported Pat's death and didn't know I had to use my own login. I was tweaking. That's a personal thing. But yeah, it's starting to happen. There was I think it was a mention by, who was it? Chase. They're starting to repossess homes now, starting to seize property now. That is on the radar, by the way. Oh, speaking of property, what a lead in Southwest Florida real estate with Lewis Walden here. Says price still elevated, not lowering. More went pending than new listings hitting the market, but have seen more fallout once under contract. Stagnant market. So there's a lot of pending. Like if one house sells, the other house will be purchased, right? I think that's kind of the marketplace right now. Let's see. The New American Reich. Jeff Rosen checking in with that. Eric E. Happy Easter to you. And Yarak Samaj. Is that James Croy? Is that James Croy? I like that. Let's see. I think we're all here. I think we're all present and accounted for. Oh, Catherine Rosen. Catherine Rosen is here. We got to talk. We got to give Catherine Rosen a little shout out. Pengreedy, user 13, always adding quality content to the 15 minutes of flame. User 13. Corn Pop was bipolar. That's a good quote. I like that. I think we're good. I think we're all here, right? Because I know people say, when the fuck is this guy going to start talking about astrology? This is an astrology show. Well, now that Jasper's here, Jasper, you ready to get down? You ready to get into the astrology groove? He says, let me make some bread here in this here crown. It's always great having my pal Jasper, the astrological cat. Yeah, this is your Sunday night gig. This is where you make the big bucks. This is where I keep you in cat food, right? Where's your little friend? Where's your new little friend? She wants to come on the show at some point. But until then, it is your show. You're the king. Okay, why don't we start off with a little chart of the moment. Let's find out where we are in the cosmos. Let's find out where we are in the cosmos. Where are you in the cosmos? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday. Who are some of the oh wow. We have some interesting people born today. My favorite, of course, is Rachel Corrie. And if you're not familiar with Rachel Corrie, Rachel was an activist. And let's do this. Let's bring her chart up here, just so we can see it. Rachel Corrie was an activist, and she was in Palestine, Gaza, staying with a Palestinian family. And said family was going to have their house bulldozed so that it could be resettled, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. That was near the West Bank. And she did a Tiananmen Square move on the bulldozer, and she didn't fare very well. And in fact, Rachel Corrie died. And she died because she was standing up for the rights of these people to not have their homes bulldozed and literally taken away from them. You can see it, right? Pluto and Libra, talking about scales, balance, justice, and opposing her sun in Leo. Now, some of you may actually have that aspect in your chart. It doesn't mean you're going to perish or die like Rachel Corrie did. But look at where her Pluto is. It's in the 8th house. And, she has Uranus also in the 9th house, which represents foreign travel and, philosophy, law, religion, universities, higher conscious, all those things that we know about the 9th house. And we have Uranus, Scorpio, right? And it is retrograde. And we have this in conjunct with the sun here. That's in and of itself was big, right? So, this is her chart for Olympia, Washington, and bang, she goes off to the quote unquote Holy Land and is in connection with the in conjunct, which is, it's a tricky aspect. And then, of course, we have also the sun in opposition with Pluto, which I talked about. And then what's really interesting, let's look at Jupiter. She's got Jupiter at 29 degrees, this anaretic degree of Jupiter. And what is she doing? I mean, she's literally sacrificing herself for somebody else's home. Jupiter in Cancer. It's a, back when I was doing a lot of writing, I think I had I probably still do have a post on my chart about Rachel Corrie and her death. And there's just so much going on in this chart, just a ton, right? Even like the Mars Moon opposition. She has a moon in Virgo and, Mars early Aries, late Virgo. But again, we see a lot of imagery around the home and violence and protecting the home. And even Cancer, it's a sign that's very protective and very domestic. And she's willing to, literally put her life on the line to protect somebody else's house. And she's an Aquarius rising, so she's not going to have a typical life path or life journey. This is usually what happens with people that have Aquarius rising. And if they do have a typical life path and life journey, their so-called reality will course correct them, because that's not what's supposed to happen with Aquarius rising. You're supposed to have an unusual life, the road less traveled. And clearly, that's where her life took her. And literally, her life got taken. It's a very complex chart. The Moon Neptune square, was it worth it? At the end of the day, was it worth it? I'm sure her parents asked that question a lot. And she's really, in my estimation, one of the lesser known heroes and figures of our time. I mean, she did something that very few people would do. She literally sacrificed her life for a family that she barely knew, right? Because of the moral character and the immoral act of bulldozing the home and removing those people from their home. So, a little remembrance here for Rachel Corrie. It's also interesting that her birthday this year falls on Easter Sunday. And of course, that took place in the quote unquote Holy Land. Very interesting synchronicity. Okay. Thought I'd bring that up. Let's see who else we have. That's just one. Rachel Corrie. Who else we have? Max von Sydow, Omar Sharif. Who else? Anybody else interesting? I think Rachel Corrie is probably at the top of the list here. Richard Pryor Jr., not Richard Pryor, but Richard Pryor. Oh, look at this. Won't fail to mention her. This is the chart of Joan Quigley. Some of you might be familiar with the name of Joan Quigley. She was the astrologer of Nancy Reagan and the Reagans. So let's check out her chart. Now, I could never figure out whether or not she was actually related to Carol Quigley, who wrote the book. What is it? Hope and shit. I was getting in trouble here. Hold on. Quick, Carol. In fact, I'm surprised that I actually remembered Joan Quigley's name, because sometimes it's one of those names that just doesn't stick around in my brain. Hope, Tragedy and Hope, which is Carol Quigley's book. Carol Quigley was born in Boston, Massachusetts. Joan Quigley was born not in Boston, Massachusetts. So let's go back to Joan. Sorry for the divergence there just a little bit, but inquiring minds must know. Where we got? Where's old Joan? Okay. Let's take a look at Joan's chart. Joan Quigley, born April 10th. I guess that's for tomorrow. Tomorrow's her birthday. And that would be the same for Rachel Corrie, so my bad. We're remembering her on Easter Sunday. So these are tomorrow's birthdays. Joan Quigley, born April 10th, 1927. She was the astrologer to Nancy Reagan, who is a Cancer, by the way. Right. So from the true node on to Pluto, somewhere in there is Nancy Reagan's sun sign. And Nancy Reagan would be in her 10th house and would actually elevate her. She was a very odd woman. I actually met Joan Quigley one time long ago. I think it was 1988, if I'm not mistaken. Her book had come out, and a friend of mine was doing a story on her, and he wanted to know if I wanted to tag along. And I think we met her at the Mark Hopkins. We sat down and he did an interview. I basically kept my mouth shut and just watched her. But she was odd. She was very, very nervous. She had a very nervous kind of vibe about her, and you can see this. She's got Mercury and Jupiter conjunction. Mercury in Pisces at 22, Jupiter at 19. And we have some squares going on. And I think that nervous function is Mars. She had the vibe of like a scared rabbit in a lot of ways. I think maybe her Virgo ascendant might have had something to do with that. But she was very instrumental in the Reagan White House. And a lot of the timings of events that were planned by Reagan went through Joan Quigley. She was the White House's astrologer. And even with the sun in the 8th house, you can tell that she's somebody who's like a power behind the throne. I mean, that's the role she's playing, the power behind the throne. Now, Reagan, of course, is an Aquarius, so she's going to have kind of an oppositional effect here with her moon in Leo in the 11th house. And I know that she do all this stuff, and I wonder if she saw that opposition as her kind of being this intuitive channel or gate to Reagan. And very unusual partnerships and relationships. The astrology piece, I would say, it would be Uranus, the ruler of astrology, and in Aries. And so she would be kind of she's right there at the beginning, kind of a trailbreaking astrological figure. I mean, she's being employed by the Reagans, for crying out loud. I mean, she was in the White House. So she spent a fair amount of time in Washington, D.C. Now, of course, there's been a history of astrologers and power, kings, queens, presidents. Obama had an astrologer in the White House. Elsa, who's been on the show, she talked about that way back in the day on her website. She actually knew the person who was in the White House, essentially doing that. So astrology doesn't really stick to political parties. Doesn't stick to political parties. They will find the advice and the consultative power of the luminaries and the seers where they can find it. But she is definitely a power behind the throne. That's pretty clear. And I think Joan probably had a very intuitive side to her as well, with that Mercury-Jupiter conjunction. in Pisces, super intuitive, trining Pluto. And it's interesting that she would use Mars and be engaged with astrology, probably to try to map this stuff out, right? Because that to me is the sort of the hard angle of mapping it out and having this ability to have an intuitive relationship with the chart or have an intuitive relationship with astrology in general. But it has to be mapped out. And even with Virgo on the ascendant, there's probably an exactitude. Now, this is back in the day when there wasn't a lot of computing power around astrology. So I would assume that Joan Quigley did everything by hand. I would assume she did everything by hand. And she would wind up having, I think, a pretty significant role on foreign affairs during the Reagan administration. Of course, she has Saturn in Sagittarius. And if you go back during that time, you'll see that, Neptune starts in Sagittarius, around 1971, 72, and is there for 15 years. So about by 1984, 85, we're talking second term in Reagan's presidency, roughly, right? If I'm not mistaken. I'd have to go back and look. But I think her Saturn in Sagittarius is playing a role, right? Playing a role in how foreign affairs and foreign businesses getting doled out, right? And Saturn in Sagittarius in the third house. And she's, again, probably using some degree of exactitude when she's talking about astrology and timing, etc. So she was, she wasn't a big deal back in the day. She became more of a bigger deal after she left the White House. So there you go. Joan Quigley's birthday is tomorrow. How about that? Who's today? I want to see who's today. I was a day ahead. I was one day ahead. Whose birthday is it today? Anybody interesting? Let's see. Oh, Well, it's a good thing I started with tomorrow. Heyoka Ya is the most interesting person so far. Oh, Linda Goodman. Today's Linda Goodman's birthday. She's interesting too. Speaking of, so you have two really influential astrologers born one day after each other. You have Linda Goodman on the 9th, and you have Joan Quigley on the 10th. Interesting. Linda Goodman was a double Aries. If you want to look at her chart, I'll throw it up here. She was born April 9th, 1925 in Morgantown, West Virginia. Think about being born in 1925 in Morgantown, West Virginia. That would be a whole different world. And then you're going to wind up being probably the most influential pop astrologer of the 20th century. And her books to this day are still money, right? So she's a pioneer. Sun, ascendant conjunction, double Aries. We got Mercury in the first house retrograde in Taurus. She's definitely a pioneer. Jupiter in the 10th house. So you can make a case here that Jupiter was good for her career, rules publishing. And she's got Jupiter up there. Part of almost a Grand Cross, but not quite. I would say that Linda Goodman probably had to overcome some degree of prejudice. And what do I mean by that? Prejudice in the sense that astrology was looked upon as either, especially if you're born in Morgantown, West Virginia, 1920s, 1925, and you'd have to be a double Aries to kind of get over that and get through that. She's a heretic, right? That's the prejudice I'm talking about. She's a heretic, and she has a full moon in Libra, so she's people that have full moons, they're born on full moons, they have these interesting lives. where they're illuminated. Right? It's like full illumination of who they are, what they're supposed to do. You'll find a lot of really well-known people who are born on full moons, and there it is, right? Full moon in Libra, seventh house. I don't have any insight into her relationship, but if she had clients, I bet she did extremely well. But she was great in terms of publishing. She made a boatload. Her book sold a lot of copies. A lot of copies. What's interesting too is that she's got Mars and Gemini, just like Joan Quigley. Wow, that's fascinating. They both have Mars and Gemini. Two extremely preeminent philosophers. Mars and Gemini, very different charts. Super, super, super different charts. Really different charts. And you could tell that she's, with the true node and Leo and Neptune. She came about astrology again. I don't know Linda Goodman's life story, but she came at astrology from the hobby space. I can tell you that right now. She fell in love with astrology. It was a hobby, and we can see that her Venus Sun trining into Neptune, and really, really getting passionate or impassioned about her hobby probably served her really, really well. And if you have a Saturn transit of the fifth house in your chart, if you can use that transit in order to get really good at something you love, the Saturn transit will be worth its weight in gold when it goes through the fifth house. Because it's not fun. It's not a fun transit. But if you work hard at something you love, you'll get something out of it. You'll definitely get something out of it. So you could tell that she loved astrology. Look what happened. Took off. She took off. Yep, totally. And again, the squares here are interesting. Like, she's got this Pluto square right there, right? Pluto on her fourth house cusp. And I think she's going to just cut against the grain of her upbringing. She's going to be a bit of a rebel. She's going to be a bit of a pioneer. And even the square with Jupiter is like, okay, let's let this thing roll. Let's see what I can do. Let's test the reality of, what I'm into or what I believe in. So it's a really interesting T-square. And guess what? I think it paid off for her. Linda Goodman and Joan Quigley, two of America's preeminent astrologers, back to back. Very interesting stuff. Who else do we have? What else is interesting is that tomorrow, Dolores Huerta, who's also an activist, born in the same day as Rachel Corrie. We get these time twins, and we can see patterns in time twins. So with Linda Goodman, and then the next day, Joan Quigley. Really interesting. All right. Anybody else? Oh, Hugh Hefner. Today's Hugh Hefner's birthday. The guy who fucked up sexuality for men. And I truly believe this. He totally fucked up sexuality for men. Created, in many ways, unobtainable images of women, yours included. So there's Hugh Hefner. There's his chart. Born April 9th, 1926. So that's 1 year after Linda Goodman. That's interesting. And he's got Mars and Jupiter in Aquarius, another fifth house aspect. Jupiter rules publishing. And what do we have down there? We have the opposition with Neptune. Again, that's an interesting opposition. It's like the illusion, right? The illusion, the sheen and the illusion of the lifestyle that ultimately Playboy wound up portraying. And we've got Venus. Where's Venus? It's in Pisces. Venus in Pisces. And then trining Pluto. That's making money. It's making money off of women. And Pluto is sex. He's got Pluto in the 10th house. And Pluto, whatever sign it's in, it's, I wouldn't say disregard the sign, but it rules sex, right? Pluto rules the taboo. And he basically mainstreams it with Cancer. Cancer is the mainstream. Cancer is Joe and Jane Public, right? That's what Cancer does. And he's got Gemini on the midheaven, so he is a bit of a trickster with Gemini up there. Strange cat, very strange cat. Very lurid rumors about his sex life. Maybe I should find out where Sirius, the dog star, is on his chart. I'm leaving you a bit of a hint there, bit of a clue. Today is also the birthday of Ra Uru-Hu, the founder of Human Design, whose chart we went over a few weeks ago. So there's a lot of really interesting people born today. Paul Robeson, who was basically busted for being a socialist and was out in the House of Un-American Activities. Who else? Anybody else it's interesting today? Jimmy Tingle. I don't know who Jimmy Tingle is, but it's an interesting name. I'd like to have the name Jimmy Tingle. Somebody out there know who Jimmy Tingle is? Paulina Portsakova, the beauty that married Rick Ocasek, which I never really quite understood, but that's okay. Not being able to understand things makes the universe interesting. Anybody else here? I got to find out who Jimmy Tingle is. Who is Jimmy Tingle? Jimmy Tingle was born in 1955. He was an American comedian. He was raised in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He attributes his eye for the absurd and his acerbic wit to his early environment. Jimmy Tingle. I guess he was on Conan O'Brien. Does he live in Austin now? Jimmy Tingle. I'm sure somebody out there knows him. All right, those are some of the birthdays we got going on. Let's look at the chart of the moment. Let's see what we have tonight. Or just what we have tonight. We know who we have tonight. Let's see. Finding your madness. I love all these articles on astro.com. Pluto and Aquarius. Oh, it's finding your muchness. Finding your muchness. What the hell is muchness? Finding your muchness. Did you lose your muchness? Did anybody lose their muchness? All right, let's see what we got. If you lost your muchness, would you put an ad on Craigslist? Would you do that? Lost muchness. Wednesday at about 3 p.m. on BART, headed to Hayward. Let's see. Let's do this. I thought I had this. Guess not. Local will set the clock for Austin, Texas. And away we go, looking at the chart of the moment. View. Actual size. There we go. Back home, bring it on home. All right. There it is. Excellent. All right. So let's take a look at the chart of the moment. Let's see what we got going here. All right. There's that moon in Sagittarius squaring Saturn. But by the time you awaken tomorrow, it will be in a very different position. It'll start to move into trine with Chiron and the sun and Jupiter. And one of the things that I'll just toss out there, when you wake up tomorrow, do your best to wake up on the positive side of the bed. We're going to go on the positive side of the bed tomorrow, not the negative side of it. You're going to wake up on the positive side of the bed. And even if you got a few creaks in your back, or maybe you slept wrong and your neck is kind of, wonky, right? Tomorrow is a day that is a half cup full day. Start the day with a cup half full versus half empty. You know why? Because the moon is going to come right in here and it's going to start to trine Chiron and the sun and Jupiter. So the potential to fill your sails over the next 48 hours is quite good. I think there is a real science to cultivating good cheer, right? Try it out for 48 hours. Try it out, especially if, because if you look around in the world right now, right, just a small sample size of what's going on in the world, it is fucking crazy. It's crazy. It's fucked up. It's weird. It looks and smells and feels like the end times. And I wouldn't be saying, I'd be lying to you if I didn't think that we're headed down towards the end time, down by the river, right? I mean, that's what it feels like. But it's supposed to happen this way. We're at the final degrees of Pluto and Capricorn. We're coming to the end of a major cycle that theoretically started on July 4th, 1776, but Pluto was in Capricorn even before that, right? So we're coming to the end of a Pluto and Capricorn cycle. We were just catching the 27th degree of it inside of the US chart. There are 27 degrees before that in Capricorn that started, right? So it's not just, when they started that month-long process of writing that piece of paper, there are 27 degrees before that. So we have to take that into account as well. Like, it's not just the beginning of this country, but everything that led up to it. That's all part of this Pluto and Capricorn cycle. But it's all coming to an end. It's not just, this version of the United States, but it's also everything that went into that before that, right? So that said, you could either, snort, chop up a black pill and snort it, and you might get something out of it. Or you can practice cultivating what I would call good cheer in the midst of this process. And over the next 48 hours, I think you have an opportunity to do that. And a lot of us are creatures of habit. And we wind up reanimating old habits, old patterns, old ways of looking at things. And I think the biggest challenge for us is to break those patterns, change those habits, and practice other potentialities. Now, I'm not telling you to, look around and say, oh, the world is perfect. The world is good. In some ways, in a weird way, it kind of is, right? In a weird way, the world is perfect and great in the way that it's supposed to be, because it will resolve itself eventually, right? There's so much that's way out of the scope of our ability to control what's going on, right? But it will resolve itself eventually. It's the nature of things. If you look at a fire, I like to use this analogy. If you look at a fire will ultimately burn itself out, right? It'll ultimately burn itself out. It will cease to exist in the intensity and the fury of, and the damage that it might have caused along the way. That it will ultimately become extinguished. And what's happening now will ultimately become extinguished, because it's the nature of things, right? It's the nature of elements. In the meantime, as a test over the next 48 hours starting tomorrow, let's see what you can do, right? If you can continue to hold a positive space, one that's connected to affirmation and faith. We're gonna roll with the resurrection theme here. You get to ride this transit of the moon up through Chiron, up through the sun, and up into Jupiter. And then guess what? It's going to move into Capricorn, and you get to keep riding this lunar wave. And it's going to connect in with the true node and Mercury and Uranus and Venus. And that's over another 48-hour period, right? So you have basically, 2 days here, 4 days in order to attune yourself emotionally, because when the moon moves into Aquarius and hits Pluto later this week, that's going to be a very interesting conjunction. Shocking, to say the least. Shocking. So my strategy here for you would be to, first of all, build up your faith muscle a little bit. So, yeah, it's going to be fine. It's going to work out. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. It's going to work out. I have faith. I have faith in the cosmos. I have faith in myself. I have faith in things that are beyond my control, right? And then you get to practice it, right? If you practice optimism over the next 48 hours, there's a good chance you're going to get optimism back, right? I mean, this is one of the fundamental laws of the universe. Whatever you put out there, it's going to come back to you. It's just that if you're an asshole all the time, guess what's going to happen? You're going to attract assholiness back to you. Okay, this is going to happen. I remember one time when I was a kid, I was in junior college, I think, and I decided to have an experiment. So I was not into like death metal or anything like that. It was just really not my thing. But I think I had a record that was really, really, really intense. I forget what it was. It was like kind of bordering on, hardcore noise and death metal. And I remember I decided I was going to put it on in the morning, and I was going to channel that energy that day. This is my test. I was going to channel the energy of that record that day in all of its like dark sonic fury. And guess what? I had a really fucked up day. I remember that. It was like, man, that didn't work out too well. Maybe I shouldn't have gone all in on that record today. But that was my plan. I was going to go full on Ubermensch with the record, and didn't work out too well. Now, maybe if you have a dissonant personality, I mean, it might work for you. That might be your magic tea. It might be your magic elixir. Wasn't mine. Even with the Scorpio rising, it wasn't mine. So we have the moon in Sagittarius, and I would say build up a reservoir of faith for the next couple of days. If you're in a cynical space, I understand it. It's easy, real easy to be cynical. There's plenty to be cynical about. There's plenty to be demoralized about. But here's where the moon comes into play. Now, the thing with the Sagittarian moon, Sagittarius can be cynical. It is a sign that can be very cynical. Bill Hicks was a Sagittarius. That motherfucker was cynical. And by the way, he was not Alex Jones. Are you going to come up here on this show? You're just going to come here and meow. It's the understudy. But I'm offering up a different version of the Sag moon. And even tonight, right, we have this in conjunct. We have Venus and Mars right here. Nice little sextile going on. And there's that moon in conjunct, the focal point. So this is really the discussion topic for this chart. I would say let's look at it, right? Let's look at it. And I've been thinking a lot about, let's see, that's Mercury, my bad. That's Mercury on the other side of the odd, not Venus. There's Mercury, and there's Mars. I'll save that thought about for another entree. All right. So what does this look like? Mercury, Mars. Okay. Thought, methodical, generally slow in Taurus, but tonight and tomorrow even with the trine with sextile with Mars, it speeds up. It speeds up, so you can make reasonable, factual decisions. Lewis, you may even see an uptick a bit in the market this week. We'll have you back next week, Lewis. Give us a report and let us know how this week went, especially when the moon moves into Capricorn and starts to trine a lot of these Taurus planets. We get into that moon Mars opposition. Something's got to give. So this is our ability to think and communicate, our ability to act, and our emotions around all of this. Taurus is domestic. Cancer is domestic. Sagittarius is not domestic. Sagittarius wants to roam wild and be free. Sagittarius wants to hang out with the Mongolians and have a yurt that moves from place to place, right? These are very, very domestic energies. The moon in Sagittarius isn't really domestic. And so what we're attempting to do here is harness some restlessness, right? We're here at this day, this moment, this time, we're here to harness some restlessness. Now, by the time we move into Monday, right, that moon kicks into a very, very different gear. And I will again bring this up. I will bring this up as a suggestion, not a challenge, but a suggestion. And over the next 48 hours, you can rewire how you're experiencing consensual or consensus reality. And you're the one that controls it, believe it or not. And you control it by being optimistic and being passionate and of good humor and good faith, while those around you may not be displaying the same traits. It's the most revolutionary thing you could do. The absolute most revolutionary thing you can do right now is to anchor a sense of potential, faith, positivity, and optimism for the immediate future. Give it a shot. What do you got to lose? 48 hours. Let's see what kind of receipts come back. Because that's when COVID started to hit, my stated goal was to not be caught up in the dystopic nightmare. Because that's what it was. It was a dystopic nightmare. And when people would ask me how I was doing during that time, I made a concerted effort to say that I was great. Never been better. Why? Because there was a heavy duty, very thick bandwidth of I've never been worse out in the world. And so me, one person, I wasn't going to be able to change the entire world, right? But I was going to be able to change anybody that I connected with in that moment to remind them that somebody in the world was doing great. And was I doing great? Some days I was. Some days I was struggling with what was going on in our reality. It was a real challenge. You had the 1-2 punch of COVID and Floyd, coronavirus and the summer of Floyd, right? That was a hard mixture of energies to deal with. So I made a choice, right? I made a conscious choice. So that's where we are with this moon. Make a conscious choice over the next 48 hours. Lean into it. See what happens. See what comes back to you. But wait a couple days. Hell, we go into the moon in Capricorn, which is far less enthusiastic than the moon in Sagittarius can be. But the moon in Capricorn here coming in, trining the true node and Mercury and Uranus and we'll catch the end of Venus right at the end. It'll be by degree, but we'll catch the end of Venus with a trine. And you might have some really interesting rewards 2 days out. And I would say you could, if you want to. Well, let's see what happens, and maybe I'll get something on the material plane that will satisfy me. That could be true. If you want to, you could do that. But if you did it without doing it, it's always better. Right? It's always better if you do something without the expectation of it coming to you. Right? So, what kind of miracle, what kind of magic can you participate in as you move your energy into this stellium of Aries that we got going here? That'll be an interesting exercise. And even the square to Neptune, right? As we get into those final degrees of Sagittarius, what's that square to Neptune going to be about? Are people going to not take you seriously? Will they reject your positive entreaties outright because they can't handle it? I guess you'll find out. Right? I guess you find out. And at a certain point, who cares? Right? Who cares? Anyway, that's what's going on with our transit of the moon. And the conjunction of the moon and Pluto, that's going to be very interesting. If I'm not mistaken, is it the first conjunction of the moon in Aquarius with Pluto since Pluto ingressed? I think it is. Let's see, when is that? I got to be specific here. Let's see what that is. All right. That'll be a really interesting day, to say the least. All right. Okay, where are we? April. The year's a quarter of the way through. All right. So we're looking at Friday. Friday the 14th. Friday the 14th, we have our first. Let me get back in here. Bring it up. We will have our absolute first Moon Pluto conjunction in Aquarius. By that time, the Mercury square to Pluto will be separating, so we won't have that Mercury square, which would be good. So Sunday is 7 days from now, right? So the Sun, on the other hand, will be at the final degrees of Aries, which will be squaring Pluto on Friday. I think the Moon comes in on Thursday night, late Thursday night, and then you'll wake up with the Moon having conjuncted with Pluto. That'll be an interesting transit. It's a Friday. They I've said this before. They like to drop the news bombs on Friday. And as the Sun moves into Taurus, we're dealing with more of the money situation, which is getting interesting. There's a bill that's floating around the House here in Texas for Texas to start up its own gold-backed digital currency. And my sense is that on the back end of this Pluto return and Pluto going into Aquarius, the United States is probably going to be balkanized. I mean, it already is, but it just feels like that's where it's headed. And for how long, I don't know. But it feels like it's headed towards some form of balkanization on the other side of Pluto and Aquarius. Think of Hunger Games, think of Pan Am, right? These are predictive programming examples in modern cinema. And you're going to start to see more and more of what I would call competing currencies. So if you're a state, let's say you're a state like Texas, or you're a state like I don't know, Arkansas, and you see that the Fed is going towards a centralized digital, bank currency, right? As a state, what would you do? You may not want to participate in that. You may not want to participate in that. So I think we're going to see more and more of these, whether or not they actually wind up passing, but you're going to see these efforts that are going to come at a state level. You may even see municipalities, counties, towns look around and go, you know what? We're going to be under the yoke of the beast. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that you have to use a Federal Reserve note. There's nothing in the Constitution, clearly nothing stated in the Declaration of Independence or the Articles of Confederation. If I'm correct, and I believe I am, you can use anything to transact, right? So you could have a local currency. That's one of the things that the freemen in Montana got in trouble for. They wanted to start their own local currency. They were just ahead of the curve. And there were people that weren't ready for it. Well, I think people are going to be much more ready for it. So when we have the moon coming in here on Pluto, right, on the conjunction with Pluto, and we see the sun square. So it's going to bring up more and more of these ideas that the financial system itself could fracture and become fractal, and it, like a pane of glass, right? You hit a pane of glass, and it spiders out. It has all these different cracks in the original form, and I feel like ultimately that's where we're going to head. I mean, look at what's going on with the banks, and they're trying to basically run a big fish eating the little fish bank system, and just completely drain these banks, so that you have the too big to fails, and they all agree upon, the Fed now, or the same version of the digital currency. And I'm telling you, they're going to be in competition. They will be in competition with other currencies. It's going to happen. And it's not, because this is the nature of the beast with Pluto and Aquarius. All these really well laid out plans, they're not going to fulfill themselves in the way that people who think they're going to kind of run the table or create a new paradigm, that what's going to happen is the opposite, or the inverse is going to happen. So instead of having one central bank digital currency, you're going to have like maybe 100 different currencies. That's going to happen. And it'll be interesting to see how all that gets sorted out, right? So I think we're going to have a bit of a taste of that coming on Friday. And you're going to hear more and more news about states looking at creating their own. In the case of Texas, they want to back with gold, and I don't know what Texas gold situation is like. I live here. I don't have any real hardcore political connections, but that's what they want to do. So again, that's part of the balkanization piece, which I think is on the other side of this Pluto in Capricorn. Pluto in Capricorn, return of Pluto in Capricorn, the U.S. chart. Right. So that's on Friday, though. We have a lot of ground to cover until Friday. You'll get some resistance, I think. Well, the resistance was earlier today with the Moon Saturn square. Did anybody have any issues with their mothers today with the Moon Saturn square? I'm just curious. Venus is about to go into Gemini. So I've really enjoyed the Venus transit through Taurus. I bought new clothes during the Venus. In fact, I'm wearing a new shirt. See this? There you go. I got this shirt with the Venus transit through Taurus, and I wound up getting a couple of pairs of shoes yesterday. Kind of indulged a little bit. I've enjoyed the Venus and Taurus. So Venus moves into Gemini, and it's much faster. It's a much faster Venus. And Lots of reflection, not personal reflection, but reflection in the air. Oh, whenever Venus goes through Gemini, the relationship with siblings really, really comes up. But I like the fact that when it moves into Gemini, it will be trining Pluto in Aquarius. There's something interesting about that trine, really early on. So what are we talking, like Wednesday? I mean, to me, it feels like a Venus Pluto trine. We have this strange occurrence where we find out we have more in common with each other than we don't. That's what it feels like to me. I like it. I like that Venus Pluto trine, and it happens fast. And if you've had some estrangement with some of your siblings, this week would be an excellent week to maybe look at that, patch that, do the best that you can in order to make sure that there's no unfinished business, right? You don't want unfinished business. So I think it's a good week, especially when we hit around Wednesday, Thursday, we get that nice Venus Pluto trine that you can stick out, reach out, have an olive branch for your siblings, and maybe your siblings might surprise you, and they're the ones that are bringing the olive branch to the table. All right, so there's our chart of the moment. Voila. Hope you got something out of that. Let's see, who do we have? We got 256 people. We got a nice intimate crowd tonight. All right. You want to talk RFK? Let's get into RFK. Now, I don't have a birth time for him because I could not find one, but I'm going to put him at 12 noon birth time. Let's do that. Here we go. So this is his chart. And the first thing that I noticed is that he was born he was born one day before an eclipse. And we have another eclipse coming up, which we'll talk about in a bit. But he was born, so the eclipse was on the 18th in 1954. So he's definitely part of the eclipse cycle. And it is a lunar eclipse. That's the one thing about, again, if you're a Kennedy and you're born on an eclipse, it feels fated, doesn't it? And that you would go through something quite dramatic in a lot of ways with your family. He has that south node right there on the cusp of the fourth house. And it feels to me like there's I don't know what it was like growing up as Robert Kennedy Jr., but it almost feels like there would be an intense burden to carry around. I mean, look at all the Capricorn he's got in this chart: Chiron, true node, Venus, Sun, Mercury, super stellium in Capricorn, and the burden. I think the burden and the weight of being Bobby Kennedy's son and the weight of being a Kennedy in general. I think that'd be really, really, really tricky. Really tricky. And then the roots of where you come from. And so this kind of disturbing, disruptive, quality of Uranus down here. It's a really interesting conjunction with the South Node in Uranus. I feel for this guy in a lot of ways. I really feel for him because I think he's got all the tools to be potentially a great leader. I mean, this is what Capricorn theoretically aspires to be, to get to the top of the mountain. And he has some elements in his chart that I think are very, very difficult. And I'm not even talking about like what happened to his father or, his voice, which we could probably address. I'm just thinking about when he came out and really came out swinging against Fauci and the vaccine. He came out with his book. I guess he married Cheryl Hines, who was Larry David's wife on his TV show. And she basically came out and cucked him, right? Publicly cucked him. And he had to apologize for some of his comments. And you can kind of see this here with the moon and Uranus and the South Node and Cancer, and the disturbing quality that comes out of his home life or his family life, his relationship with women in general, right? And it's, I felt sorry for the dude. I mean, literally had to apologize for what he said because his wife came out, and it's clear she's not on the same page as him with, his stances. And I would find it problematic. No matter what you think about your, liberal friends or feeling like you have to save face in public by denouncing what your husband says, you can't do it. You just can't do it. And he's going to throw his hat in the ring. And I guarantee you, he's going to have to answer for that. He will have to answer for that. Why, even your own wife believed you were wrong. You see what she did to him? Now he's got to overcome that. It's interesting, with this South Node Uranus conjunction. What is he bringing in from another lifetime? Disturbance, disruption, to some degree chaos, right? He is got to deal with that. He has to deal with that Uranian function in his chart. And he has to be an iconoclast in a lot of ways, an anachronism, an anomaly. So if we look at it from what's happening with the current Democratic Party, which is really not the Democratic Party his father was a part of, or his uncle was a part of, right? Or even he was a part of. It's a very, very, very different bill of goods. And so he'll wind up playing the role of the radical. That's what'll happen. He'll wind up playing the role of the radical who is a traditionalist. He's going to have to carry that burden. He's going to have to remind people of what it is to be a kind of a Kennedy Democrat. And that's going to be really interesting to see how this thing plays out. One of the things he doesn't have a lot of in his chart is fire. You can look down here. He's got Eris and Pluto and Juno, and that's it. That's it. That's all he's got. And we know that he's a boomer, so he's got Pluto and Leo. And that's down here in the fifth house. And he has all these inconjuncts going on. Oh my God, look at that. Pluto in conjunct the true node, in conjunct Venus, in conjunct the sun. And Pluto is death, right? So this in conjunct and death in his childhood. He was 12 years old when his father died. He's barely entering into puberty and adolescence. He hadn't even gotten into the Saturn opposition yet. 12 years old. And that this is impacting him. It's another heavy, heavy burden, right? He's got the heavy burden of the opposition and the thing that's associated with the family. It's really interesting, this whole idea of the Kennedy curse and the death of the brothers, right? And Teddy. It's almost like it's on him, right? He's the guy that is ultimately the downstream recipient of the family chaos. And he's got to do something with it. He has to do. I think the guy's brave because I understand him. If I were to reset his chart and rectify it, I'd probably have Algol on his ascendant. It wouldn't be that much further off of what we're looking at here. I'd have Algol on his ascendant because he has a hard time talking. He's got that that piece. It's just challenging. You know, it's like a Mercury here. Zoom in, look at Mercury. Okay, so he's got a Mercury square with Saturn. Yeah, right. Saturn right here, Scorpio, Mercury Saturn square. Bada bang, isn't that right? Quintile. There's Jupiter. Yep, square Saturn, and then also a square Neptune. The Neptune square is really big. Saturn square, right at the end, 10 degrees. It's a wide square. No wonder he has a hard time talking. He has a hard time talking. He's got a freaking Mercury Saturn square. And Mercury Neptune square. That one's hard. That one's tough. You know, especially if you have a challenge in actually speaking with a Mercury Neptune square, who's paying attention and listening. That's the other side. Also, I feel like the Mercury Neptune square is the cuckery of Cheryl. You know, he gets out there, he's like, hey, this is what's going on. This is, you know, I'm righteously indignant about the whole thing. I'm righteously indignant about it. And then he's got his Mercury Neptune square with his wife coming back on him. It's all part of this T square too. It's all part of this T square. And Neptune is cardinal, and Moon, it's actually Uranus. Uranus is cardinal, of course. Capricorn is cardinal. Cardinals. Now he's got Mars in Scorpio, so the guy will get through things. He will get through things. He'll get through his father's death. He'll get through his wife's cuckery. And even with Capricorn has this drive and this goal to get to the top. You know what I think would be really, really interesting is if somehow he's able to primary Biden and win. And then, you know, Trump comes out of the Republican side. And it sets up this scenario where, remember when Bill Gates said, oh, yeah, I went to the White House and apparently he'd had a conversation with Bobby Kennedy about vaccines. And, you know, he wound up listening to me and he wound up giving us $1 million. Right. I would love to see that. I'd love to see Trump and Bobby Kennedy debate because, you know, Trump is a debaser. That's what he does. He's a debaser. He'll debase anybody. And it'd be very interesting to see how that would play out on TV against a Kennedy and against somebody who in many ways has a disability. I hope that they wind up facing off against each other because, you know, theoretically he had gone to Kennedy and he and Kennedy were going to establish some kind of vaccine guideline. I mean, that was the idea and that didn't happen. That would be worth the price of admission. He's got this fated inconjunct and he's got Pluto coming in here. And Pluto is going to be, well, it's inconjunct now. It's inconjunct now. Where's Pluto? It's at 2029. I guess it comes in at around the final Pluto at 27, retrograde to the Pluto return. He's got one more inconjunct with that Pluto before it moves forward. And what's interesting is that, again, I'll show you on the night of the election, Pluto will be on his Mercury at 29 degrees. I think, what is it, 50 minutes or something like that. It's right at the end. Could he wind up getting elected president? I'd say yes. I'd say he has more than a puncher's chance if he can make it through. I don't know if he can make it through, though. With Pluto up here conjuncting all of his personal planets, and he's dealing with, you know, this quote unquote Kennedy curse and this Uranus wild card. It's going to be a really, really interesting ride for him, for sure. But he's got staying power. The guy's got some staying power. And he's got that Mars sextile to Chiron. He's got that Mars trine to Uranus. This will be an interesting run for him, for sure. The South Node is going to be going through Libra. I don't necessarily think that it's a death sentence. My experience with the South Node as it transits through a person's chart is that it releases things from the transit. It releases things from the past. It releases what's sort of been held in abeyance and kind of hermetically sealed. So it'll be interesting. And we get into Libra, we get into things like justice and fairness and equality. And he's got a big mountain to climb. But with all this Capricorn in his chart, I think he's probably capable of it. I think he's capable. He's going to be a very interesting character to watch, especially as it relates to him actually getting to a point where he can primary Biden. And if he gets through I just see this as a gauntlet for him. I see RFK Jr. as literally running a gauntlet with Pluto. And it is fraught with danger. I'm not going to lie. There is some dangerous potential here. We got the Pluto Neptune square that, he's going to have to address again. He's had it going on for a while. And I think the Pluto Neptune square probably to some degree forced him to write that book and experience the backlash. This guy's experienced a lot of backlash. I mean, the corporatized hate, the mainstream hate for him was pretty big, as we were, going through this COVID bullshit. And yet, what is he doing? Be easy for him, I suppose, to just be a Kennedy. I have my book published and, I'll finish out my thing and, I'll go live in Nantucket or whatever. Right. But or Long Island or wherever Cheryl wants to live, but he's not going to do that. He is not going to do that. And in a lot of ways, the final degrees of Pluto in the U.S. chart are really reflective in this chart. They're very reflective of this chart. Is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. our last greatest hope as the last president of the United States of America? That's an interesting question to ask. Let's look at his chart. Let's look at a different chart. If he does not make it, if he doesn't make it, I think he will clearly be disruptive enough so that he could take out a lot of people along the way on the Democratic side of things. I just think it's good. I think it's good for the country. Let me see if I have the right one. Just to have this choice involved, to see somebody who's coming in from this kind of old school model. All right, so this is his chart with election day. Now, I know when election day is. It is the 5th of November, 2024, and I just have 6 a.m. Start the day off. Well, at the start of the day, Saturn, right? Saturn, that's him on the outside. Crests that the morning, his Saturn, right? The day, election day. If he gets that far, Saturn will be on his ascendant, which actually I think is a good transit. And again, if he gets that far, the sun will be in conjunction with his Mars. So far, I'm liking both of these aspects. And then here we go. There's our friend Pluto, right? Right on his sun, Mercury, true node, Venus. We see it. We see it in action. So this is either the beginning or the end, right? The end of the line of the Kennedys or the beginning and kickstarting a new version of Camelot. His father was, Bobby was a Scorpio. So anytime there is a presidential election, it's always in Scorpio. I actually think they should move to Sag season, but that's just me. And look what we have here, Jupiter return. As an astrologer, hey, I think that's a good thing. It's a little bit off by a few degrees, but not by much, right? The run up, and at that time, look at that, even transiting Jupiter's retrograde. See that? And his Jupiter in Gemini is retrograde. Look at that. Dueling Jupiter retrogrades. I think there's going to be a lot of fuckery with this election. Of course, there's always fuckery, but it's gotten worse. And this time, there's no difference. But his Jupiter retrograde might cancel out the other Jupiter retrograde that is happening at the same time. Very interesting. I'm going to look at this day in general, but pay attention to Mars and the position of Mars. It's in a very, very interesting position. Is this the chart of somebody who could be elected if they get that far? Yeah, I think so. If he gets that far, this guy's got a puncher's chance. And especially with the Jupiter return, and both really interesting. When you get into Gemini, you're also getting into the whole kind of sibling effect, and I wouldn't call, of course, JFK a sibling, but I would throw aunts and uncles into the whole Gemini mix. I would definitely throw him into the Gemini mix. This is a super interesting chart. I think he's got a puncher's chance if he gets that far. I really do. If he gets that far. Because there is a gauntlet with Pluto that he's going to have to run. Okay, so let's check this out. Let's do something. I'll show you the energy of that day. And this is really, really interesting. So on that day, election day, we have Mars at 0 Leo. Whoa. Whoever gets elected that day is going to have tremendous power. Whoever gets elected that day, let me restate it one more time, will have tremendous power. So we better hope that whoever gets elected, and there will be an election, there'll be an election. Whoever gets elected on that day is the right and the worthy candidate. Because Mars is just coming right in at 0 Leo. That's a big energy. Big energy. So we have somebody here who's elected that could do tremendous good, but with the Pluto opposition, they could also be a tyrant, right? They could be a tyrant, an absolute tyrant. Then we have the moon and Venus in conjunct with Mars. It's just the moon, my bad. Just the moon in conjunct with Mars. And it's in Sagittarius, where the moon is tonight. How about that? I like the energy around this day. I like the energy around election day. The sun is at 13 Scorpio, and it's in a wide trine with Neptune. I'm sorry, it's in a trine with Saturn, not in a wide trine with Neptune. So I think there's some fuckery, right? There is some fuckery here. Where's Pluto? Is Pluto retrograde? Let me just go back and look. Now, Pluto's direct that day. But we have this Jupiter retrograde. I think there's some fuckery. But it's almost like RFK Jr.'s Jupiter just cancels that out. This is a really interesting chart for an election. Yep, there's conflict, there's chaos. We've got squares to Neptune, which are never dependable. Clearly not dependable. Moon Neptune square. There's a lot of like loyalty, broken loyalty. This is a really interesting day. Whoever is elected inherits Mars and Leo at 0. It's like the Caesar, right? It's like the Caesar. So we better hope that whoever winds up in that spot is somebody who's worthy of dealing with that and handling that. Because if they're not, they'll be a tyrant. You think we haven't witnessed anything. We haven't witnessed anything. And who knows? Maybe we need a tyrant. You know what's really disingenuous about American politics is that we wind up getting tyrants who front. And they front. And I know that people thought Trump was a tyrant. Trump wasn't a tyrant. No, he wasn't even close. In fact, Trump wasn't a tyrant enough. He took all the heat for being a fucking tyrant, but he didn't have any of the he didn't have any of the what's what I'm looking for, tools. He didn't have any of the tools for tyranny, and yet he took all the heat. It's like, I've said this before. If you're going to take all the heat, you may as well be a fucking tyrant. Just lean into it, right? He did everything in his power to not lean into it. And on the surface, he ate a bunch of shit for 4 years. So if they're going to call you a tyrant, just, put on your lucha libre mask and, let's go. Right. But that energy it's going to be a very interesting election. Let me show you the difference between the two. This is a really interesting dichotomy. So if we go back and we look at when Trump got elected in 2016, where was Mars? Mars was exactly opposite where it's going to be, right? Where it's going to be on election day in 2024. Now, remember, we're going to be on the other side of a major eclipse. And we'll talk about the eclipse here in a minute. Not the one in April. But we'll be on the other side of this thing. And we're going to have an election on the other side of this eclipse. And maybe that's going to play into that Mars and Leo energy. Because when Trump was elected in 2016, Mars was in Aquarius. And you could see what happened. There was a freaking revolution, right? With Mars and Aquarius. And what was it doing? It was squaring Uranus. Uranus was in Aries. So we had a Mars Aquarius square going on there. And that's exactly what happened. That was the template for Trump's presidency, was that Mars in Aquarius. It was revolutionary. And the revolution was happening on both sides. Of course, in the beginning, it was the revolution of the right. It was the revolution. It was the MAGA revolution. It was the red hats. And then it quickly turned into the purple revolution and the counterinsurgency and the counter revolution, right? And that's what happened. That's what he inherited. And we saw exactly every single day, every single week, every single month, 4 years worth of Trump was marked by this Mars-Uranus square and Mars in Aquarius. It's not the same energy in 2024. No, not at all. So if Trump's elected or reelected in 2024 and this Mars Leo energy is in the air, you can bet your ass that it will not be the same 4 years. And that tyrannical energy or the energy of a Caesar, that's in the air. And woe unto those who have crossed. If Trump gets elected, woe unto those who have crossed Trump, because it'll be a very, very different presidency with Mars and Leo. Of course, that Mars would be in his natal 12th house. He's still got to get through that Mars this summer, right? So it's a 2-year cycle. So this summer we're going to have Mars and Leo. And eventually, 2 years out from there, because those are those Mars cycles, it'll be in Scorpio again. I'm sorry, Leo again in his 12th house. So interesting, very interesting. So whoever is going to be elected will have the burden of Mars and Leo in that grand trine and the Pluto opposition in the final degrees of Capricorn. There you go. Little election astrology for you. Not elective, but election astrology. Let's take a look at this eclipse coming up. Let's get into this eclipse. Oh, boy. Okay, first of all, let's do this. Let's do a little wiki. Let's do a little wiki. Let's do... let's do a little historical review of 420, April 20th. Let's just go into... some of the historical moments that are associated with this day. They're not inconsiderate. They're pretty significant. And you can even look at like 419 and 418. So in 1657, freedom of religion granted to the Jews of New Amsterdam, later New York City. How about that? 1657. On the celebration of the high holy days or the low holy days of Molech. Interesting timing. 1775, the American Revolutionary Siege of Boston begins, following battles at Lexington and Concord. Those are big events in the history of this country. George Washington, 1789, arrives at Grays Ferry, Philadelphia, while en route to Manhattan for his inauguration. 1792, France declares war against the King of Hungary and Bohemia, the beginning of the French Revolutionary Wars. These are all big 420 events. Huge 420 events. Wisconsin, it's your birthday, 420. How about that? Robert E. Lee resigned in 1861. He resigns his commission in the United States Army in order to command the forces of the state of Virginia. So that's a statement. Let's see. Let's get into the current timeline. You have the Curies, Pierre and Marie, refining radium chloride. That's in 1902. The Baron von Richthofen shoots down his 79th and 80th victims, his final victories before his death, the following day. So he's at the height of his glory on 420. And then the next day, kaput. Let's see. On his 56th birthday, Hitler makes his last trip to the surface toward Iron Crosses to two boy soldiers of the Hitler Youth. 20 Jewish children used in medical experiments at Neuengamme are killed in the basement of the Boerlenhusser Dam School. Well, we are in the period where there does seem to be a historical reference to sacrifices of children. Doesn't matter which religion here. Children are sacrificed, apparently. We have the League of Nations dissolving, giving most of its power to the United Nations. That's 420. It's a big day. Big day for the United Nations. Just sucks up the last remaining embers of the League of Nations. Was supposed to be the original United Nations, but the United States wouldn't sign on it. So they had to have another war. They had to have another war to end all wars so that they could have a global body like the United Nations, because the League of Nations, it didn't fly. We got the Bay of Pigs invasion It's the failed 1961 right there. Enoch Powell has his Rivers of Blood speech, which ultimately becomes true, even though the ethnic group that he associates that speech with is not the ethnic group that ultimately radically changes the tone and tenor of England. And in fact, that ethnic group winds up getting along with the ethnic group that's already there. He's talking about the immigration of Jamaicans and West Indians coming into England. And of course, they wind up getting along just fine. They have the whole two-tone movement, ska, the specials, madness, right? No, it's later on, and he ultimately winds up being correct in his speech. What else do we have here? Let's see. Oh, 1972, the lunar module commanded by John Young and Charles Duke lands on the moon. Supposedly. Interesting day for a 420 event. Here we go. Here's the first. We have the Columbine High School massacre. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold of the Trenchcoat Mafia kill 13, interesting number, injure 24 before committing suicide at Columbine High School in Columbine, Colorado. Well, that's a rabbit hole, isn't it? Happens on 420. I spent a lot of time down that rabbit hole. Trenchcoat Mafia. Let's just say there was a profound distaste for Christians amongst the Trenchcoat Mafia. And the leader of the Trenchcoat Mafia the year before had, who had graduated, but there was still a trench coat. His father was the head of the FBI in that area. Strange, isn't it? Another little strange thing about Columbine is there are rumors. Now I can't substantiate these rumors that Trey Parker and Matt Stone were actually Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris. Now they did go to the same school. Those guys went to Columbine, and I'm not saying they are, but I've seen some forensic stuff that looks, well, let's just say quite interesting. Quite interesting. The South Park guys, really the Columbine guys? Question mark. Danica Patrick, she won the Indy Japan 300. Wow. I didn't even know she won a race. Look at what happens here. 2010, Deepwater Horizon. Drilling rig explodes in the Gulf of Mexico. You guys remember that? Wow. That was heavy. That was heavy fucking duty, right? Heavy duty. And everything that happened after that was just heavy duty. 420 event. That to me is, I mean, you factor everything in. You have, the sacrifice of the burning bodies and, the sacrifice of the ocean. I mean, that was a huge, huge event. That was a torch ritual. That whole thing was a torch ritual. And then, of course, you had all the core exit that was being dumped into the Gulf, which was changing the marine biology really from, algae on up. Right. It was huge. That event just that event tore me up. And, it was just like how they had some really reasonable solutions to deal with what happened in East Palestine, Ohio. They had reasonable solutions to deal with this thing. I remember early on, there was a guy who said, hey, look, we can use bales of hay. I actually interviewed the dude. I actually interviewed him on my podcast. And I asked him about, his method. His method is, yeah, we figured out if you use hay, the hay will soak up all the oil. We got plenty of hay. Now, of course, you would have to deal with the rupture in the line. But as far as the wildlife and, the birds that the, within probably about a 2-mile radius of the coastline, it'd probably be very effective. Anyway, There's another 420 event right there. Oh, look at this. For the first time in history, oil prices dropped below zero. Who is our president? Donald John Trump. And then 2 years ago, seems like it was just yesterday, state of Minnesota found Derek Chauvin guilty on 420 of killing George Floyd. All charges. It's an interesting day, this 420, but it's not alone. Let's go into 419 because it's also in the same vector of Molech. There's a number of interesting days that support this sacrificial undercurrent. Oh, what are you doing with the other cat? They're hanging out a little bit. Yeah, is that your new buddy? Is that your new buddy? Oh, there's some licking going on here. This is very sweet. You guys friends now? Oh, yeah, sniff that butt. Get that butt sniff in. There you go. Sniff that butt. Oh my. This is a miracle. This is a miracle. Yeah, you guys are pals now, huh? Look at that. All right, let's get back here. Look at this. So on 419, Albert Hoffman deliberately doses himself for the first time 3 days after having discovered its effects of LSD on April 16th. So on 419, he's at it again. 419, Charles Manson sentenced to death. Later commuted life imprisonment for the conspiracy, the Tate LaBianca murders. That's on 419. The Simpsons first appear as a series of shorts on Tracy Ullman, first starting with Good Night, 419, Days of Molech. And we have a gun turret exploding in USS Iowa, killing 47 sailors. Woo. Here we go. The 51-day FBI siege of the Branch Davidian building in Waco, Texas, ends when a fire breaks out. 76 Davidians, including 18 children. That's the number that you want to pay attention to. Under the age of 10 died in the fire. That's what you call a ritual bonfire sacrifice. Then we have 2 years later, the Oklahoma City bombing. Alfred P. Murrah building, Oklahoma City, bombed, killing 168 people, including 19 children under the age of 6. And of course, Brigadier General Parton actually toured the underbelly of the building and found plastic explosives down there. And of course, the excuse for that was that, well, they were going to use those plastic explosives for a drill. The entire building was leveled, absolutely leveled. And all the remains of the building were buried. And I believe to this day they are guarded. One of the things that the Murrah building housed was a lot of the evidence from the FBI siege of the Branch Davidians. So a lot of the evidence of the trial and pre-trial was here at the federal building, and of course, gone. Oh, look at this. 2013, the Boston Marathon bombing, right? Tamerlane Tsarnaev is killed in a shootout with police. His brother Dzhokhar is later captured hiding in a boat inside of a backyard in the suburb of Watertown. So let's go over these winners, right? Oh, here we go. Here's another one. 200 ATF and FBI agents lay siege to the compound of the white supremacist survivalist group, the Covenant, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord in Arkansas. That's in 1985. The CSA surrenders 2 days later. Wow. Then you have the Simpsons. Of course, the Simpsons are a big part of this whole thing, right? They're all part of the predictive programming of the times that we're in. I guess if you're paying attention, hidden in plain sight, if you're paying attention. Then we've got the Branch Davidians. Then we have the bombing at the Oklahoma City building. Then we have the death of Tamerlane Tsarnaev at the shootout, which I saw on TV. Essentially, that's all happening. Actually, I saw him. I didn't see the shootout. I heard about it. I saw him essentially walk into a cop car completely naked. I saw that. I stayed glued to the TV that night and I watched it. And yeah, he was completely naked, hands behind his head, walks into a cop car. That was Tamerlane Tsarnaev. So that's all 419. And then, of course, we have 420, which connects us into some of the other events that we're talking about. So it's a pretty loaded day. Am I right? It's a loaded day, and it's a period. It's not just one day. It's a period where there are sacrifices for the god Molech. And there's a movie. I'm not going to play it. And I'll show you the image. This is the image that a lot of people are familiar with. Right? This is what it looks like right here. This is what it looks like. Right there. There you go. Give your little baby over to this entity that's been summoned. Let's blow those shofars. I guess those are horns. It's not a shofar. Shofar is like a real horn, right? There is a video on YouTube that has, I'm not going to play it. I don't want to play it. I go, come on, Robert, play it. No, you guys can find it if you want. I'm trying to get you prepped for the moon in Sagittarius. I'm trying to get you prepped for that. But there is a video on YouTube if you want to track it down. And it is a performance in Chicago. I think it's from around the 20s. And there is that version of Molech, with the fire in the belly, which is ultimately, where the sacrifice is made with the child. And I think it was the Zionist Arts and Theater Troupe of Chicago or something like that. It's an actual performance piece with people dancing around, and there's Molech on the stage, and of course you have a priest-like character, and there is a child involved. Now, some people believe that it's of course it's a doll, right? It's a doll. But is it a doll? Question mark. I mean, it's really a shocking little clip of video. Go check it out. It's on YouTube. Just look up Molech Chicago film. You'll find it. You can see for yourself. And it's a celebration, right? It's a celebration by a Zionist dance and culture trope. It's embedded. It's embedded in the culture. I mean, why else would they do that? Why else would they do that? I mean, what if they were just kind of wanting to hoist a flag for their new country, which is about 20 years off in the making, right? Why couldn't they just do something like that? But instead they had to reenact this ritual thing. So here's the chart for 420. Right. And we've seen some of the loaded prehistory of this day. And now we have an eclipse. By the way, like I said, RFK was born on an eclipse. I mentioned that. He was born on a lunar eclipse. And so here we have a lunar eclipse. It's not in Cancer, but it's in Taurus. And man, when I think of Molech and I think of these mystery Babylon desert religions, I think of Taurus. I totally think of Taurus. You know, it looks like Molech has kind of a bull. Like sometimes he's depicted as being a bull god, like a bull god, and he's got this furnace in his belly, right? That's what it looks like. So really, this is the embodiment of that Molech energy, you know. And the eclipse is not lunar; it's a solar eclipse, and it's a total solar eclipse. We won't see it here. It's going to be mostly in New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, that area, right? That part of the South Pacific. But the energies are planetary. So, yeah, what are we looking at? We're also looking at a Pluto Sun square, Pluto in Aquarius, Sun in Taurus, 0, right? That's a heavy duty square in and amidst this eclipse energy. That's a heavy square. It's a fixed square. It is the first square to Pluto with the Sun in Taurus in the Pluto and Aquarius cycle, and it's happening on an eclipse. So one of the things that I'm definitely getting out of this is money. There's a money thing going on with this eclipse. You know, I try not to be a fear monger, and eclipses they just evoke fear. And I've gone down this path where we've looked at eclipses and I think I've done a pretty good job taking the edge off of eclipses, because sometimes we'll go through a heavy eclipse energy and it doesn't always go down that the way we think it will. I've seen eclipses in people's charts not happen. I mean, really profound, intense alignments with eclipses. I've seen other charts where eclipses happen in people's charts, and they happen. The proof is there. The one that everybody knows is the Great American Eclipse on Trump's ascendant in 2017. Literally, as an individual, also with Mars and his ascendant, he was eclipsed. His power was eclipsed. The next 4 years, his power was eclipsed. It's exactly what happened. Exactly what happened. I have another friend whose sun is at 28 Leo, so that eclipse happened on her sun. And the years after that have been kind of rough for her. She had a really challenging time post eclipse. She's doing okay, but you know, I can kind of see like, wow, that's an interesting sort of path that she's been on, and not an easy one, right? And even for Trump, it wasn't an easy path. So sometimes these eclipse energies are, you know, they're real, they're valid, and other times I've seen also extreme examples of them. Like I had a client, and I mentioned this before, with Pluto at 28 degrees on her ascendant in Leo, and I asked her, I said, "Hey, what happened to you in 2017 when that eclipse happened?" She said, "Oh, nothing. No, nothing." And you would think that somebody with an eclipsed sun, the degree of Pluto on her ascendant, would be like fucking game changer, and you know, one that could be, you know, to some extent even fatal. No, nothing happened to her. Nothing happened to her. So eclipse energies are interesting because sometimes we think that they'll, you know, rock our world, and other times, sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. Now, we're talking fixed degrees here. We're talking fixed sign. So I think that matters. And even with Leo, it matters, right? I don't know. My theory is that this client who had that their life had been so turned upside down. This was somebody who had a major breakdown and had to go through major addiction crisis at a point in time in her life where it doesn't happen like that. That shit usually happens in your 30s or 40s. This was happening in her 60s. Big, huge crisis. And she lost everything. And I'm thinking maybe that might have had something to do with it. Maybe she'd been so already transformed by the intense nature of what she experienced that eclipse was going to be nothing for her, really, in a lot of ways. And yeah, maybe there's some truth to that. But this is the eclipse energy here. And if you're in the early degrees of Taurus in your chart, I would pay attention to it. I would definitely pay attention to this eclipse if you're early degrees Taurus, or if your ascendant is early degrees Taurus. Or if you're early degree Scorpio on the other side of it. But I feel like if you're early degrees Taurus with the sun and the ascendant, I would pay attention. I would definitely pay attention. So what are you going to do? You're going to run and crawl into a hole and hide until the eclipse is over? No, you can't do that. You can't do that. I think what it does is it tests the nature of reality, especially if you're a Taurus. It'll definitely test the nature of reality, and you'll kind of get to see what you're made of in a lot of ways. And the thing with eclipses is that, we're kind of in that cycle now. It's April 20th, and so we're in that pre-eclipse cycle. And then we get on the other side of the eclipse cycle. So it's really about a week and a half and a week and a half. So we're dealing with basically 3 weeks of eclipse energy. But then the energies play out until we come through with the next eclipse, which is in May. I think it's around May. Is it the 20th or 25th? We have the lunar eclipse. It's not long after this, right? So we're going to complete the circuit with these two eclipses. And we'll have a lot more information around the financial stuff, I think, after these two eclipse cycles have consummated. It also really feels like we're in this digital currency money game. That we're gonna see. I'll kind of front load this thing. We're gonna see some ripples here. We're gonna see some ripples in the money game. And I would not be surprised if the Ripple XRP case with the SEC gets ruled on right around this time. It'll be a Thursday, right? Thursday or Friday. I would not be surprised if we see something with the whole SEC thing with Ripple XRP, because this is about a ripple, right? This eclipse is not just a minor ripple, it's a major ripple in the financial game. Because with Pluto and Aquarius, Pluto's resources and other people's money. And remember, digital currency is electric, and Aquarius is electric. It's totally electric. So we're going to see something here. It's a shock to the system financially. We had some nice sextiles that day, some pleasant sextiles. But I think this eclipse is significant because of the degrees, 0, 0, right? That's a fixed square, and this eclipse energy coming right in. Could we be dealing with some other kind of version of whatever has gone down on 420? Maybe. It's in the air. The high strange is in the air. You got Greg Popovich shouting once again to ban guns. Could we go through another event that all of a sudden we're dealing with, more Chiron and Jupiter and the conjunction in Aries and Jupiter conjuncting Eris and Discordia in the air? Yeah, sure. Quite possible. I mean, right now, every other week it could end up that way. Seriously. Every other week we could just spin the wheel. And what latest crisis, real or psychologically operative, are we going to have to deal with? It's in the air. Something big comes out of this though. With that Sun Pluto square, it's like there's something that comes out of this that is there's a finite judgment or finite determination. Like never going to happen again. This is never going to happen again. That's what I see here with this Sun Pluto square. Real or imagined, never going to happen again. I think there's significant energy around this eclipse. Historically, we've seen event after event take place historically with this eclipse, either 420 or 419. We just showed the receipts, right? So there's a canon. There's a historical canon. There is an egregore that exists with this day, right? It is an egregore. It is a thought form that exists with this day. There is, of course, not just the historical canon and the egregore. It is clearly days that are set aside for the fiery sacrifice of children in the belly of Molech. This is all part of this eclipse. So I would say buckle up here. Buckle up. And for you people that are early degrees Taurus on the ascendant or your sun, be strong like bull. You know, this is also Wall Street. This is Wall Street. Wall Street is the bull, right? We've seen the infamous picture of the golden bull, the golden calf on Wall Street. This is financial. This is definitely financial. It's financial, but it could be more than that as well. We could have a series of things happening on this eclipse. Financial, earth changes. I think we're about due for a pretty powerful earthquake. Earth changes, financial, and then you've got the whole gun thing floating around too, right? Man, this is a loaded eclipse. Loaded eclipse. So you want to bank on that goodwill over the next 48 hours, right? And whatever happens is going to happen. Whatever happens is going to happen. But we've just uncovered three things: earth changes, hardcore disruption to the financial economic system, the sacrificial historical record of Molech, the historical canon of events that are related to this, right? We're throwing them out there. We're throwing them out there so we can dispel them. We can dispel them. And then, of course, we have the currency stuff. Of all of it, I think this is going to be currency related. Currency related, Wall Street related, monetary. I think this, and we've got the whole Ripple XRP thing quite possibly being ruled upon and coming into focus here. So, don't be afraid. Don't freak out over the eclipse, right? Just do your best not to freak out about it. If you have the ability to pull some money aside and get yourself some silver, my thing is, I talked about this on Nisha's show. If we go through a period of destabilization, which I think is more than likely to happen, when, that's a whole other discussion. But if we go through a period of destabilization, what you want to do is you want to buy yourself time. You want to buy yourself at least 3 months worth of time. So you don't have to go running around looking for food or begging for food. You want to be able to buy yourself some time. So I would say, be prepared for at least 90 days. That's the minimum. Be prepared for at least 90, because you want to be able to buy time. You don't want to have to be on an empty stomach or hungry for, a week or 2 weeks in. Because things, if they do go into that place, they're never set in stone. Trust me. There's a lot that can happen when you're in a period of flux. So, maybe you want to make sure that you have enough supplies on hand to get you through a 3-month destabilization period. Check your preps before we go into this eclipse. That's advice that I would give you. Check your preps for sure. The other thing that I think is interesting about this eclipse is a stealing of the will. In Taurus, we get the digging in of our heels, and I think there's power in fixity. I think there's power in being consistent and sticking to your guns. This eclipse may darkly illuminate that process. It may darkly illuminate that process. And so one of the things that you may wind up looking at through this eclipse is really what you're sticking to, what your allegiances are, and how fixed are they, and to what degree. I'll throw this out there too. I mean, this is part of the conversation. This is what David would say. What are you willing to die for? What are you willing to die for? And I do think that that's an appropriate question. I do think that's a question we need to ask ourselves. What are you willing to die for? What is the hill that you're willing to die on? This eclipse kind of brings that up. Not that it's going to be so apocalyptic that you're going to have to stare it down, but it may evoke that, right? It may evoke those kinds of feelings. And what are you willing to die for? I think that's a byproduct of the energy of this eclipse. And I think you'll get some answers out of that existential question that I think we all need to ask ourselves. What are you willing to die for? And the other part of that equation is, what are you willing to live for? That's the other part of the equation. In a time where it's all doom and gloom, right? And clearly there are things on the table right now. There are things on the table that are, they're fixed in terms of their proposition, right? They're fixed. It's like, nope, there's a line here, and not crossing that line, or you're not crossing that line over here. And those are all very personal, right? But there are fixed line situations. Like, do you want to take a chip in your arm? No, I don't want to take a fucking chip. That is a line in the sand. That is a Taurus, Sun, Taurus, square Pluto moment, right? That's a hill. The digital currency, that could be a hill. Like the hill that you're going to die on. Like, what is that thing? And on the other side of that, we can't be running around and scurrying around and, being mole rats, right? And waiting this thing out. Like, there is a thing called life, and you have to live life, right? And you have to be able to basically hold these two poles. One pole is the pole that says, I'm willing to die for this. This is my hill. And the other pole is, I'm willing to live for this. Because you can't take that out of the equation, right? This is what you're here to do. With whatever limited resources you have, you got to do it. You have to do it. Taurus is the earth. It is the earth. It is not Venus. Taurus is the earth. And so when we have this eclipse moment with the sun in Taurus, right, it sort of freezes things out. And you're like, yeah, you're right. I am here. I am on this realm. I have a third dimensional relationship with things. I'm more than my third dimensional relation. But then let's be honest here, right? If you don't have things that sustain you, whether it's food or water or oxygen or love or beauty, right? In the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, beauty's kind of up there, but it's still part of the deal. So that's the other part of this eclipse. Reminds you that you're in a physical body in this world, and you're here to do something with it. So what is the hill that you're going to die on, or willing to die on? What are you willing to die for? And what are you willing to live for? These two things are not mutually exclusive. They're part of the same conversation. And when the moon moves into Scorpio and we get the lunar eclipse on the back side of this, we get tested. We get tested on those things. All right. I think we're good. And let's see, it's 10:51 back east. And I know you East Coasters like to get to bed early or early enough. Tomorrow's Easter Monday, though. Some of you people have Easter Monday off, and then some of you don't. So for those of you that don't, I'm going to end the show. So a couple of things before I do end the show is if you're interested in CBD, let me get my friend Chris's website up here. So if you're interested in CBD, my friend Chris has absolutely great product. Got some of it right here. This is the 19, which has a very nice effect, very similar to the gummies, and also bringing in some of the anti-inflammatory qualities of CBD. So let me just go into his website here. I'll give you guys the pitch. There you go. So we have products by True Hemp Science, and if you go in here and you spend $100 or more, just type in 15MINS. That's 15MINS, and you can get free product delivered to you with your order. And there are a number of people in the chat. If you have any questions about his products, just ask, and you'll have some wonderful testimonials in there in real time. Now, the other thing we got going on with Chris is we're trying to get him basically named the best of Austin in terms of CBD. Okay. So I'm going to give you guys a link here. I'll put it in the show notes. Let me just show you. This is what it looks like. Let's get rid of this. And if you go over to the Austin Chronicle, all you got to do is go in here, right? I'll leave the link in here. Vote austinchronicle.com. CBD purveyor, right in your nomination here. It's a two-step process. You have to go in, you'll vote, and then unfortunately they'll ask you for your email. I'm sorry, but I'm just giving you the information up front. You can always cancel anything that comes from the Austin Chronicle, but we're trying to get Chris some love locally, and if you could do that, that'd be awesome. Okay, I'll have a link in the notes for the show. And then also, if you're interested in getting a reading from me, I do readings, and you go to my website, robertphoenix.com, and jump on in and book a reading with me. I enjoy it. It's a big part of my life, and I love working with people and using astrology to navigate through these very turbulent and at the same time triumphal times that we're in. Turbulent and triumphal. That's a good way to start your Monday with the moon in Sagittarius. All right, chat, take good care. Mods, thank you for all your help and everything you do. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel if you like it. I have a lot of other content that we do over here. We do Astro Weather Tuesday through Friday in the morning. We have the Friday Forecast where I have guests. We have the Crimmies on Friday who were terrific. We're talking about the electrification of your garden with copper. We'll have Leela from chat on next week, or this coming Friday. We'll talk about tremor release. That'll be a really interesting show. So there's a lot of really great stuff. I don't gate any of my content unless you're a member of the 11th house. And I do have a private sort of town hall meeting, town square meeting happening on Zoom this Saturday. So if you are a paying member of the 11th house, you get to attend. We get to hang out. I'll go over some astrology. We do these about once a month. It's the only gated content I have. Everything else is all out there. So I appreciate your support for everything that you bring to this. And Chataria, much love to all of you. Use your head in order to discern what's real. your heart to set what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix, and we'll see you guys here on Tuesday. Well, not here on, well, I guess so. Here on Tuesday for Astro Weather. Take good care. And for myself, Jasper, and Peachy, bye for now.